Welcome to this lesson on Designing Universally, an introduction to planning for learner variation. So far, we've been learning how to develop training activities and interventions that can help participants demonstrate skills, concepts, and values that we identify as important. But if you think about it, this approach to design can easily make an untrue assumption. When designing curriculum using one predetermined instructional method, strategy, or plan, we're assuming that our participants are a homogeneous group that has the same needs, learning abilities, and characteristics, and will therefore benefit the same way from our training. But in reality, our participants are a diverse group of individuals with different abilities, personal histories, and motivations. Such diversity requires that we design varied training interventions which are accessible to the widest and most diverse group of participants, and that we allow participants to demonstrate their achievement of learning outcomes in various ways. The purpose of this session is to help us reflect on how we can make our instructional design more universal so it can appeal to diverse participants. The theoretical framework that focuses on such diversity and accessibility is called universal design. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain what diversity is and provide example principles that help to achieve it, describe various diversities often encountered in schools and workplaces, and apply universal design strategies to a learning design project to make it more accessible. This session has 3 sections. First, we'll discuss universal design in general and look at several principles that can guide our practice. Second, we'll look at the different diversities we often encounter in schools and the workplace that we must plan for. And lastly, we'll discuss some practical strategies you can implement in your design process to make your products more accessible. Universal design refers to the principles, processes, and strategies that help planners make products and environments accessible to the broadest diversity of users. Universal design is often discussed in several different disciplines, including architecture, city planning, business, engineering, and of course education. In education, universal design can help instructors and designers develop curriculum that appeals to the diverse physical, psycho-emotional abilities, learning styles, cultural backgrounds, and so on. At the core of UD is the idea that our curriculum and learning environments should be barrier-free, which means that all learners can fully participate in the training, regardless of how special their needs are. There are a number of principles we can use as designers to guide our practice and ensure we're creating curriculum and products that are accessible to the widest diversity of people. First is equity, which means that everyone can use our products regardless of their limitations or learning preferences. As just mentioned, this means that our products should be barrier-free. Second is flexibility, which means that our products should accommodate a wide range of people and not just be relevant to or represent a select group. Third is simplicity and intuitiveness, which means our curriculum, tools, and interfaces must be easy to use and understand. Fourth is perceptibility, which means that the information we share needs to be easily seen and/or heard, regardless of ambient conditions, environments, and the sensory abilities of participants. Fifth is tolerance for error, which means that we need to be accepting of and minimize negative consequences for mistakes and misinterpretations. Sixth is low physical effort, which means that when we require physical activity, we should maximize efficiency and comfort and minimize the potential for fatigue. Lastly is size and space, which means that we need to make sure participants with different mobilities, postures, and body sizes can easily approach and use the learning environments and objects we create. Now that we have a little background about universal design, we're going to look at the diversities we encounter in our participants, specifically diversities in ability, learning styles, and culture. When designing curriculum and learning objects, we need to be aware of the variations in ability that exist for our users. For example, as we just discussed, we should plan and use learning activities, technologies, and environments that do not require unnecessary physical strength, movements, or posture, which might exclude people with physical impairments, mobility issues, injuries, different body sizes, and so on. We should also design our curriculum thinking of how accessible our information is for people with sensory impairments. For the blind or visually impaired, this might include making sure our text can be made larger, that the contrast and size of videos can be controlled, or that our file types work with screen reading applications. For the deaf or hard of hearing, this might include using closed captioning, allowing viewers to see and read lips, or sharing the script of lectures. For learning impairments like decreased motor skills, problems with keeping attention, or issues processing language, we can also design our curriculum so information is simple, user interfaces are intuitive, and the speed of delivery is controllable, and so on. As we'll discuss later, we can also make accommodations in assignments and outcomes to ensure participants with learning impairments can fully participate. Lastly, we might have participants with various psycho-emotional impairments like depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and so on. Our design might therefore include flexible deadlines, approachable and empathetic trainers, support with time and project management, and so on. For all of these variations in ability, it's important that instructional designers are aware of and integrate external support services within the organization they're designing for. If, for example, your organization has a counseling program or a health and safety program, make sure your participants know of these services. In addition to variations in ability, there are many educational theories that categorize different learning styles, suggesting that people have different preferences, strengths, and weaknesses related to their optimal conditions for learning. If you think about it, it's likely that you prefer different ways of learning, whether it's writing and reading, listening and talking, thinking and reflecting, watching and doing, and so on. Another way to say this is that people prefer different modalities and mediums for receiving and expressing knowledge, skills, and values. There are several theories related to learning styles. One example is Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. His theory suggests that there are 8 ways people prefer to express their intelligence. These include kinesthetic intelligence or body smarts for those who easily pick up motor skills, interpersonal intelligence or people smarts for those who easily connect with others, verbal or linguistic intelligence or word smarts for those who easily absorb and express information using speech or text, intrapersonal intelligence or self-smarts for those who easily connect with their internal thoughts and feelings, and so on. Although Gardner has 8 categories for intelligences, the precise number or themes of categories is somewhat theoretical and open to interpretation. Theories like Gardner's do, however, emphasize an important idea which is relevant to universal instructional design. This is that to appeal to the widest diversity of learners, we need to include various and diverse ways of learning and expressing information. These might include physical activities, social activities, verbal and written activities, reflective activities, and so on. Besides variations in ability and learning styles, most modern classrooms and workplaces have people with many different cultural and demographic backgrounds. When designing for cultural diversity, you need to think about how your participants might have different language abilities, cultural knowledge, and value systems. To be inclusive of language abilities, you should be careful of such things as using jargon and idioms or speaking too quickly. Regarding cultural knowledge, you should be careful of assuming all participants will understand references to your own culture, for example, movies, politicians, celebrities, and so on. As for value systems, unless your curriculum specifically addresses these issues, you should be careful of making positive or negative references to such topics as religion, sex, politics, and so on. To ensure your instructional design is inclusive of different demographics, you need to think about how your participants might have different genders, ages, sexualities, and so on. To be inclusive of different genders in your design, for instance, you should be careful to use pronouns he and she evenly when discussing example people, or to use they to remain gender neutral. You should also be careful of how you represent gender, for example, by not using gender stereotypes. As for ethnicity and age, you should also be careful of inclusion, for example, when choosing pictures or media of groups of people. As well, like gender, you should be careful of representation, for example, by not using racial or age stereotypes. Lastly, regarding designing for inclusion of different sexualities, you should be careful of both heteronormativity and LGBT phobia. Heteronormativity is the automatic assumption that all people seek attention and intimacy from the opposite sex, and LGBT phobia is the fear and hatred of people who are not strictly heterosexual. Again, like the other demographic groups, you should be inclusive in your choice of language, images, and other media, and be careful not to use stereotypes. We've already discussed many specific examples of design strategies, but in this last section we'll highlight a few of the major strategies that you can use in different stages of your instructional design process. In the analysis stage of your process, when conducting a needs assessment of your participants, you should conduct research at your organization to determine if participants have special requirements or needs. Although you should by default be using universal design principles to be as inclusive as you can, designing for inclusion takes time and resources, and it is very difficult to predict and accommodate everyone. During analysis, you may find that there are participants with special abilities or needs that you didn't foresee or plan for, which will help you make adjustments when planning and designing for accessibility. As we learned when discussing learning styles, in the design stage of your process, you need to provide multiple means and modalities for representation, action, expression, and engagement. For example, a popular online learning model is called R2D2, which states that good online curriculum should incorporate opportunities for reading, reflecting, displaying, and doing in its design. Similarly, using theories like Gardner's, you should incorporate activities for developing and expressing different intelligences like interpersonal, intrapersonal, verbal, and so on. By incorporating different activities and learning styles, your design should by default appeal to the broadest diversity of learners. Lastly, in the design stage of your process, you need to keep the universal design principles in mind to make curriculum equitable, flexible, simple, intuitive, and so on. Ideally, if you've planned for all variations of ability, learning styles, and culture, you shouldn't need to make adjustments in the delivery stage of your design. In reality, however, this ideal is very difficult to achieve as you can't predict and prepare for everything. As we learned with the principle related to flexibility, trainers and instructors should therefore be prepared to make adjustments to accommodate for learners who need extra support or to extend learning opportunities for learners who aren't challenged enough. Examples of accommodations for learners who are struggling include giving more time for tests, extending deadlines, giving more one-to-one support, providing different resources, and using alternative outcomes. Examples of extensions for learners who aren't challenged enough include giving more challenging assignments, letting them support others, and using alternative outcomes. Lastly, there are a series of questions we can ask ourselves when evaluating our curriculum or learning product. We need to ask, how does my curriculum or product unfairly challenge people with different abilities, learning styles, and backgrounds? How does it include and represent different cultures and demographics? How does it incorporate different modalities for participants to receive and express information? And how does it allow for accommodations and extensions? Asking each of these questions throughout the design process can help us evaluate how well we've incorporated universal design. Now that you've been introduced to universal design, your task is to apply universal design principles and strategies to your final project. You might begin by evaluating your current plan using the evaluation questions we just discussed. Once you've reviewed your plan and made adjustments, you should also review the course site for further tasks related to completing course assignments. Thanks for your time, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email me.